He was just a boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old, hiding in the corner of a small Ohio house while his mother screamed and threw things across the room. She was angry, confused, and high. JD had seen this scene before, too many times. But this time was different. She grabbed the steering wheel while he was in the car, yelling that she would crash and end it all. He was terrified. And at that moment, something inside him changed. This is not a Hollywood movie. This is the real childhood of JD Vance, a boy raised in chaos, addiction, and fear. He had every reason to fail. Yet somehow, he didn't. He survived. He rose. And eventually, he became Vice President of the United States. JD Vance's story is not about having everything, it's about starting with nothing and finding a way forward. He was born in Middletown, Ohio, and grew up between that fading industrial town and the hills of Jackson, Kentucky. His family was full of love, but also pain. His mother battled addiction. His father was mostly absent. And the only real stability he had came from one fierce, unforgettable woman, his grandmother, Mama. From those early struggles, JD built a life few could imagine. He joined the Marines. He went to Yale Law School. He wrote a best-selling memoir, Hillbilly Elegy, that shook the nation. Then, he stepped into politics, and rose fast. How does a child raised in a home full of pain, addiction, and instability grow up to become the Vice President of the United States? This is not just a story of success, it is a story of survival, grit, and transformation. But behind the headlines is a story of identity, class, and personal choice. It's a story about how where you come from shapes you, but doesn't have to define you. If you're ready to learn English through powerful true stories, you're in the right place. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let's begin the incredible journey of JD Vance, from hillbilly roots to the halls of power. JD Vance was born in 1984 in Middletown, Ohio, a small town that once thrived with steel factories and proud workers. But by the time JD was growing up, Middletown was already in decline. Jobs were disappearing. Drugs were spreading. Families were breaking apart. And JD's own family was right in the middle of it. His mother, Bev, was a nurse. She was smart, strong, and full of potential. But she struggled deeply with drug addiction. Over the years, she went through a long list of boyfriends and husbands. JD never knew who would be at home when he walked through the door. Some days were quiet. Others were filled with screaming, broken furniture, or police officers standing in the living room. His biological father, Don Bowman, left when JD was still a baby. For a time, JD had no real father figure. Later, he reconnected with his dad, who had become a religious man. But by then, JD had already learned how to protect his heart by not trusting too easily. He often felt like his life was spinning out of control. He moved from house to house, school to school. He saw things no child should see. In one moment, his mother was full of love and promises. In the next, she was furious and violent. Once, during a fight, she told him she wished he had never been born. But JD wasn't completely alone. In the background, watching and waiting, was someone who would soon become the most important person in his life, his grandmother, Mama. She didn't always agree with how things were going in the family. She didn't always speak softly. In fact, she was known for her tough words and rough hands. But she had one thing that JD needed more than anything: consistency. This early period in Middletown left deep marks on JD's heart. He carried shame, anger, and confusion with him every day. But it also planted the first seeds of resilience. Even though everything around him felt broken, there was still a voice inside telling him, there has to be more than this. While Middletown was JD's home, his soul was tied to another place, Jackson, Kentucky. Every summer, his family would drive south, winding through the hills of Appalachia to visit their relatives in the tiny mountain town where Mama and Papa had grown up. Life in Jackson was different. There were no big stores, no busy streets, no steel mills. Just quiet roads, green mountains, and people who knew each other's names. The air smelled of wood and grass. The pace was slower. And even though many families were poor, there was a deep sense of pride. JD loved these visits. They made him feel connected to something bigger than his broken household. In Jackson, he wasn't just a boy with a troubled mom, he was part of a family tree that reached back generations. He belonged to something old, rooted, and strong. But there were also contradictions. JD began to notice how people in Jackson talked about hard work and family values, yet many struggled with unemployment, addiction, or violence. Some blamed the government. Others blamed the rich. And some blamed outsiders who didn't understand their kind. This contrast between pride and pain made JD think. Why were so many people in his world angry? Why did it seem like no matter how hard they tried, things kept getting worse? At the same time, he noticed how outsiders often looked down on places like Jackson and Middletown. On TV or in newspapers, people from Appalachia were shown as lazy, ignorant, or hopeless. JD didn't recognize that version of his people. They weren't perfect, but they were more than the stereotypes. These early experiences gave JD a complicated identity. He was not fully from the city or the country. He wasn't rich or truly poor. He felt like an outsider in both worlds, but he carried them both inside him. Later in life, these thoughts would shape his writing, his politics, and his mission. But for now, young JD was just a boy moving between two homes, trying to understand who he was and where he fit in. In a world full of chaos, JD Vance found one person he could count on, his grandmother, Mama. Her real name was Bonnie Vance, but everyone called her Mama. She was tough, loud, and didn't care what anyone thought of her. She cursed like a soldier, smoked constantly, and kept a loaded gun in her house. But behind her rough surface was a deep love for her family, especially for JD. Mama had grown up poor in the hills of Kentucky. She married young, raised 3 children, and followed her husband to Ohio for a better life. She had lived through poverty, heartbreak, and betrayal. And she had learned to fight back. When JD's home life became too unstable, Mama stepped in. She gave him a bed to sleep in, food to eat, and something even more important, rules. At Mama's house, you went to school. You didn't lie. You didn't give up. And if you did something wrong, she would tell you, loudly. Mama believed in JD, even when he didn't believe in himself. She told him he was smart. That he could do great things. That he wasn't like the people who gave up or made excuses. She reminded him that life was hard, but you had to be harder. There were times when JD tried to rebel. He got bad grades. He hung out with the wrong people. He was angry, confused, and scared. But Mama didn't let go. She challenged him. She pushed him. And she made it clear that failure was not an option. One of the things JD remembered most was how Mama handled truth. She didn't lie or hide from reality. If someone messed up, she said it. If someone needed help, she gave it. In a world where many adults made promises they didn't keep, Mama's word was solid. Even though she wasn't rich or well-educated, Mama had wisdom that came from living a hard life. She taught JD about loyalty, strength, and self-respect. Her love wasn't always gentle, but it was always real. Without Mama, JD Vance's life could have gone in a very different direction. She didn't save him with money or comfort. She saved him with expectations, and with love that never quit. Even with Mama's support, JD's life didn't suddenly become easy. He carried a heavy weight from his childhood: anger, insecurity, and fear. These feelings followed him into the classroom, where he often felt lost and alone. In elementary and middle school, JD was not a good student. He was smart, but he didn't apply himself. He skipped homework, got into fights, and talked back to teachers. Deep down, he didn't believe in his future. When you grow up watching adults break promises, it's hard to believe that working hard will actually change anything. At home, things were still unstable. JD's mother, Bev, went in and out of relationships, and sometimes in and out of rehab. Her addiction to painkillers and later heroin caused even more chaos. JD would come home not knowing what version of his mother he would find, loving and kind, or angry and out of control. At one point, Child Protective Services got involved. JD had to live full-time with Mama. It was painful to be separated from his mother, but also a relief. Finally, there was some peace. Around this time, something began to change. JD started paying more attention in school. He read books, studied harder, and listened to teachers. The voice of Mama was always in his head, reminding him, "You're not trash. You can be better." One teacher in particular noticed JD's potential. She encouraged him to read more, write clearly, and think for himself. For the first time, JD felt like someone outside his family believed in him too. The turning point came during high school. JD realized that if he didn't change, he would end up stuck, like so many people he loved. He saw friends dropping out, getting arrested, or falling into addiction. He didn't want that life. He wanted something more, even if he didn't yet know what it looked like. He began earning better grades. He worked part-time jobs. He started thinking seriously about college, something few people in his family had ever done. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks. Moments of doubt. Days when it felt pointless. But the small successes began to build momentum. JD wasn't just surviving anymore, he was preparing to escape the cycle that had trapped his family for generations. After high school, JD Vance made a bold decision. Instead of going straight to college, he joined the United States Marine Corps. For many young men and women, the military is a chance to escape, to grow up, or to find structure. For JD, it was all three. He needed something to break him away from the pain and confusion of his past. He wanted to prove that he was capable of discipline, strength, and responsibility. The Marines were his test, and he took it seriously. At boot camp, JD was pushed to his limits. He woke up before sunrise, trained for hours, and followed strict rules. It was hard. But unlike the chaos of his childhood, the military had order. There were clear expectations and real consequences. For the first time, JD felt like the ground beneath him was solid. He served in Iraq during the war, working as a public affairs specialist. The experience changed him. He saw a different world, one filled with danger, teamwork, and sacrifice. He met people from different backgrounds, all focused on something bigger than themselves. Being in the Marines taught JD how to control his emotions, manage stress, and lead others. He learned how to take care of his own needs, how to save money, and how to plan for the future. In many ways, the Marines finished what Mama had started. They helped turn a lost boy into a confident young man. JD also began to reflect more deeply on where he came from. Serving alongside people from across the country, he realized that not everyone grew up like he did. His past gave him a unique perspective, but it also came with habits he needed to unlearn, like expecting things to go wrong or assuming people couldn't be trusted. After his time in the Marines, JD returned home with a new sense of purpose. He was no longer just trying to survive, he was ready to build a life. And the next step in that journey would take him further than he had ever imagined, back to school, and eventually, to the classrooms of one of the most elite universities in the world. While studying at Yale, JD began to realize that his story was different, not just personally, but culturally. In class, when people talked about poverty, class, or social mobility, JD noticed something strange. They often talked about people like him, but without really knowing anyone who had lived it. They had opinions, statistics, and theories, but no real connection to the pain behind the numbers. JD had lived that pain. He had seen addiction up close, felt the shame of poverty, and carried the fear of becoming like the people he loved but couldn't always depend on. He understood the anger and the hopelessness that many working-class Americans felt, because he had grown up in the middle of it. That's when he got the idea to write a book. Not just to tell his own story, but to explain the deeper cultural struggles of the white working class in places like Appalachia and the Rust Belt. He wanted to give voice to the forgotten people, those who felt left behind by modern America. In 2016, Hillbilly Elegy was published. The book was raw, honest, and personal. It talked about growing up in chaos, the influence of his grandparents, the pain of watching his mother suffer with addiction, and the challenges of moving from a world of survival into a world of opportunity. It wasn't just a memoir, it was a mirror. It reflected the lives of millions of Americans who rarely saw themselves represented in media or politics. Hillbilly Elegy became a national bestseller. It was praised for its honesty and insight. Some readers felt seen for the first time. Others used the book to try and understand why parts of America were angry, frustrated, and distrustful of the system. But the book also sparked debate. Critics said JD blamed poor people for their own problems. Others accused him of ignoring systemic issues like inequality, racism, or underfunded schools. JD responded by saying he didn't have all the answers, he just wanted to start a conversation. Whether loved or criticized, Hillbilly Elegy became one of the most talked about books of the decade. It reached audiences far beyond politics and class. And it launched JD Vance into the national spotlight, not as a politician, but as a voice for a forgotten America. Writing the book changed JD's life. It gave him a platform. It gave him purpose. And it gave him the chance to shape the national conversation about poverty, family, and the American dream. After the success of Hillbilly Elegy, JD Vance was no longer just a student or a writer, he had become a national figure. Television networks invited him to speak about poverty, politics, and the American working class. He gave interviews, wrote opinion pieces, and was asked to explain why so many people in rural America felt angry and ignored. People on both sides of the political aisle paid attention. Some praised him as a bridge between two worlds, elite institutions and working-class America. Others accused him of simplifying complex problems or promoting a conservative message hidden behind personal storytelling. But no matter what people thought, one thing was clear: JD Vance had started a conversation the country couldn't ignore. Then, in 2020, the story reached an even wider audience. Netflix released a film adaptation of Hillbilly Elegy, directed by Academy Award winner Ron Howard and starring Glenn Close and Amy Adams. The film focused on JD's childhood and his relationship with Mama and his mother. The release brought a new wave of attention. Viewers from around the world were introduced to JD's story, and to the culture of Appalachia that shaped him. Some saw a powerful tale of perseverance. Others criticized the film for focusing too much on personal drama and not enough on social issues. JD, however, welcomed the conversation. He believed that if people talked openly about trauma, class, and resilience, real change could happen. Around this time, JD also began to shift his focus toward politics. He had seen how disconnected many leaders were from the lives of ordinary Americans. He believed that people like his mama, tough, honest, and loyal, deserved a voice in Washington. He started speaking more openly about his views on family, faith, and the future of the country. He criticized the influence of large corporations, the decline of traditional values, and what he saw as cultural decay. His message began to resonate with a growing number of conservatives, especially in the post-Trump era. JD Vance was no longer just explaining the working class to the elites. He was preparing to represent them himself. In 2021, JD Vance made a decision that surprised some and confirmed the expectations of others. He announced his candidacy for the United States Senate in his home state of Ohio. After years of writing and speaking about politics, class, and culture, he was stepping directly into the political arena. His campaign was bold and unapologetic. JD spoke openly about the decline of American communities like the one he grew up in. He criticized the media, big tech companies, and political elites, both Democrat and Republican, for ignoring the working class. He promised to fight for the forgotten people of Ohio, to protect American jobs, and to bring strong values back to government. But entering politics wasn't easy. At first, JD faced criticism for past comments he had made about Donald Trump. Before his political career, JD had openly questioned Trump's leadership style and character. But over time, his views changed. He came to believe that Trump had understood something important about the frustration and anger felt by working-class Americans. During his Senate campaign, JD received the backing of billionaire tech investor Peter Thiel, one of the most influential voices in conservative circles. Thiel believed in JD's vision and helped fund his campaign. Even more importantly, JD won the endorsement of Donald Trump himself. This endorsement gave JD a huge boost among Republican voters. He embraced Trump's message of economic nationalism, strong borders, and cultural conservatism. He visited small towns, spoke with factory workers, and positioned himself as someone who had lived the struggle and now wanted to lead the fight. His campaign message was simple: America is worth saving, and the people who built this country should be at the center of its future. Despite strong competition in the Republican primary, JD won. Then, in the general election of 2022, he defeated Democrat Tim Ryan and became the junior senator from Ohio. For JD, this was more than a political victory. It was a personal transformation, from a child raised in crisis to a lawmaker shaping national policy. As a senator, JD continued to push the themes that had defined his life, defending the working class, challenging globalist policies, and restoring a sense of pride and purpose to everyday Americans. He was no longer just writing about the American dream. He was helping to shape its future. Even after entering the Senate, JD Vance never stopped being a thinker, a person deeply involved in the ideas behind America's challenges. While some politicians focused only on laws and headlines, JD focused on the deeper causes of the country's decline. He believed that behind every political issue was a cultural one. He often spoke about the crisis of the American family, the breakdown of stable homes, the loss of fathers, and the struggles of raising children in a society full of distractions and broken values. He argued that policy alone couldn't fix these problems. What was needed was a cultural shift, a return to strong families, faith, and personal responsibility. JD also warned about the dangers of a global economy that left behind American workers. He called out large corporations that, in his view, cared more about profits than people. He believed in bringing jobs back to American soil and creating an economy that rewarded hard work, not just financial speculation. Another topic that JD focused on was the influence of elite institutions, universities, media companies, and tech giants that shaped the way people think. He felt that these institutions often ignored the values and needs of middle America. He wanted to give voice to those who didn't have a seat at the table. He spoke not only to political audiences but also to young people, students, and working parents. He told them that their lives mattered, that their voices had been ignored for too long, but that the time for change had come. In the Senate, JD Vance supported policies that reflected his ideas: stronger borders, fair trade, limits on corporate power, and protections for families and children. He worked with both allies and opponents, but always with the goal of restoring dignity to the people who had been left behind. Then came a moment that changed everything. In 2024, as the presidential election heated up, former President Donald Trump announced his return to the campaign. When it came time to choose a running mate, he picked someone unexpected, but perfectly aligned with his message: JD Vance. The announcement shook the political world. JD, still a first-term senator, was now on a national ticket. He represented a new generation of conservative leadership, rooted in personal struggle, shaped by working-class values, and unafraid to speak out. The campaign trail was intense. JD traveled across the country, meeting voters, debating policies, and defending his beliefs. His speeches were powerful, mixing logic, emotion, and real-life experience. But with higher office came higher pressure. In 2025, after winning the election alongside Trump, JD Vance became the Vice President of the United States. It was a stunning rise, from Steel Town to Senate to the second highest office in the land. As Vice President, JD stayed true to his mission. He focused on rebuilding American manufacturing, strengthening families, and challenging the global systems he believed were hurting everyday citizens. However, he also faced growing controversy on the world stage. During a meeting at the White House with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, JD refused to support additional U.S. military aid to Ukraine. He argued that America had done enough, and that the country needed to focus on its own borders and people. The moment made headlines around the world. Some praised JD for putting America first. Others accused him of turning his back on an ally in crisis. The disagreement created diplomatic tension and sparked debate across Washington. But JD didn't back down. He said what he believed, even when it wasn't popular. And whether people agreed or not, they knew one thing: JD Vance was not afraid to take a stand. From forgotten towns to the White House, JD had stayed grounded in his core message: real leadership comes not from privilege, but from experience, and from the courage to tell hard truths. JD Vance's life is not a straight line, it's a story of struggle, failure, learning, and second chances. From a broken home in Ohio to the office of the Vice President of the United States, his journey proves one powerful truth: your past does not have to decide your future. He didn't come from wealth, power, or privilege. He came from chaos. From pain. From a family and a town that many people had written off. But with the strength of his grandmother, the discipline of the Marines, and the education he earned through hard work, JD built a new path, one step at a time. There's a reason his story speaks to so many people. It's not because he's perfect. It's because he's honest. He admits his doubts, his anger, and his mistakes. But he also shows what can happen when someone refuses to give up. In every chapter of his life, from Middletown to Jackson, from Iraq to Yale, from bookshelves to ballots, JD Vance has carried a message that millions connect with, that hope is real, but it comes with responsibility. He reminds us that poverty is not just about money, it's about mindset. That education is powerful, but not enough without character. And that real change begins in the family, in the home, and in the heart. Whether you agree with his politics or not, JD's story is a reminder of what is possible in a country where second chances still exist. And now, his voice is louder than ever, as a vice president, as a husband and father, and still as a writer who believes in the power of stories to change lives. JD Vance is not only a public leader, but also a powerful writer. His best-selling memoir Hillbilly Elegy is available on Amazon. Check the link in the description or the first pinned comment. Reading his story will inspire you and help you practice your English at the same time. If JD Vance's story inspired you, even just a little, like this video, and let us know in the comments. What part of JD's journey spoke to you the most? Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another story that helps you grow your vocabulary and your confidence. Your future is not written in stone. And like JD Vance, you too can rise. All it takes is one decision, to begin. Do you want to improve your English 20x faster? Whether it's grammar, conversation, or fluency, we have the perfect material for you. Click the link in the description or the first pinned comment and take your English to the next level.